6 things you can do in January to take your financial plan to the next level. I'm excited about this list, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. Number one, a little bit of low-hanging fruit here, but increasing your contributions, this one is so important. And what I'm talking about here are 2 things, right? So hopefully, if your household income is increased on an annual basis, it's outpaced your expenses. So you're able to bank some of that money, put it back into your long-term financial plan, right? That's what we're trying to do here. So increases in your income have outpaced expenses. Let's direct it back into the plan, okay? The second angle here is retirement plan contributions have also increased ever so slightly. So if you're maxing out your 401k, TSP, 403b, you can now contribute $23,500 a year, which is a slight increase. Catch-up contributions are still the same for age 50 plus, $7,500 a year, but there is a super catch-up now. So if you're 60, 61, 62, you can now contribute up to $11,250 a year, which is a slight increase, which could be beneficial if you're trying to pad that pre-tax or Roth bucket. So think about increasing your contributions and think about the mix, what's going into the retirement accounts, what's going into your non-retirement accounts and other assets, okay? Both those things are important. We're gonna talk about that later in one of the further steps, tax diversification. Just a quick note, the Roth and traditional IRA contribution limits have remained the same for 2025. All right, number 2 on my list, run the numbers. And all I'm talking about here is seeing where you currently stand. Are you okay? All right, what we wanna do is a future value calculation. So the first step here, adding up the value of all of your long-term accounts, things that are gonna be used to produce income in the future, okay? So add those all up, that's your present value. We wanna talk about what return on investment we think we can make. You know, was it 6, 7, 8%? Let's run with one of those numbers and plug it into the system. And then we're gonna talk about the annual contributions. So how much money are you gonna be able to contribute to your long-term plan on a consistent basis? What do those contributions look like? Step 1. And then let's look at different timeframes. So 1, 3, 5, 10 years. Let's take a look at all those and project it out and see how your present value will grow and what your assets may be worth. It's also good to do, in addition to the shorter term numbers like we just talked about, the longer term numbers to your eventual transition point if it's longer than 10 years, 15, 20 year future value calculation, just to kind of see. Now, the most important part of this is, what do the numbers tell you? Are you on track? Do you understand what the numbers are telling you? Is there work to do? Are you ahead of schedule? I don't know. So sit down, look at it, and then you can come up with a little bit better of a plan based on, are you on track or are you a little bit behind, are you a little bit ahead? Number 3 on the list, make a tax plan. So many times we think about tax planning as just simply gathering our documents and sending them off to the CPA or putting them in TurboTax to get our returns done. There's more to it. We want to be proactive so we can reduce our tax liability today and also in the future. So we want to look at 2 things here, deductions and credits. These are big, right? So we want to look at these on an annual basis, make sure we're getting the most that we can from this. So W-2 employees, sometimes deductions can be limited. So there may be an opportunity to itemize your deductions, right? So we're looking at things like mortgage interest, state and local taxes, charitable contributions, okay? And then of course, there's also those things that can reduce your tax liability directly, pre-tax retirement contributions, HSA and FSA contributions. So we wanna look for all those things and try to be as proactive as possible. Also, which credits will you be eligible for? Child tax credit, etc. Those things that reduce your tax liability dollar for dollar. So that's deductions and credits. And we also wanna look at tax diversification. So what does your tax allocation plan look like? And that's simply the spread between Roth, traditional, and your taxable investment accounts. Right? Each one of those carry a little bit different of a benefit from a tax perspective. And so creating diversification there can really, potentially benefit you in the future by giving you flexibility and allowing you to create a plan. Things to keep in mind if you're in that 22, 24% tax bracket, maybe a split contribution between Roth and pre-tax makes sense. If you're 32% and above, maybe more pre-tax makes sense. It really depends on your unique situation though. There's no one right answer to this. You have to sit down, work through the numbers and determine what's right for you on the split, but consider tax diversification as part of your plan. And the last thing I'll add here is it doesn't always make sense if every dollar that you can save has to be directed to a retirement plan. Sometimes it makes sense to direct money outside of the retirement plan into a taxable investment account or other assets, okay? So maxing out is not always the right thing if it takes every dollar that you can save. All right, number 4 on my list. Make or update an estate plan. This one's important, and this has gotten a bit easier now. So there's digital tools out there that make it pretty simple to create these documents or update them if you need to, all right? So ask me about that if you have questions. But what we're talking about here is creating a basic will, power of attorney, making sure your beneficiaries are up to date on your retirement or your insurance accounts, okay? So those are some of the more basic things. And then if you have a need for an advanced strategy like a trust, guardianship, those are things to also consider. You may bring in an estate planning attorney to consult and develop a good strategy there, okay? But this is a good one to tackle in 2025. And if you haven't looked at it, it might be a little bit easier than you think to get started. Number 5, all right, this is a big one. So I actually do not like budgeting very much, but I do know that understanding where your money is going is important. So number 5 on the list is figure out what your annual spend looks like. And this is important for a couple reasons. We want to know where our money's going, but we also want to know, is it reasonable, and is that what we might base our projections for retirement on? Okay, because we've been talking about this a lot, but typically folks are spending what they spend today. That carries through into retirement years. So 2 ways to do this. One's easier than the other. I'll give you the hard way first. Number 1 is developing a detailed spending analysis, right? So sitting down, looking at your bank statements, credit card statements, and seeing where all the dollars are going, categorize it, fixed versus discretionary, and then, get even further into where your money's flowing. But, ultimately what we want to see over the last 12 months, how much money did you spend? Where did it go? If you want to take the shortcut just to get started and figure out what your annual spend is, easy way to do that is simply add up all of your taxes paid. So federal, state, local, Social Security, Medicare taxes. Okay, add that number up, add up all your savings and investment contributions, and then subtract those from your gross income. It'll give you a pretty good idea of what your annual spend is. And then you can back into some of the bigger items too, categorize them like housing, different things like that to figure out if you want to drill down a little further. All right, that's an important one to do. Don't put it off. It can be easier than you think. And last but not least on my list, set some goals. So the forgetting curve is one thing I find super interesting with humans. If we're not looking at something on a consistent basis, we just tend to forget it, right? So it's got to be in front of you, and you got to keep it in front of you. So you got to make a plan to keep it in front of you. So if you haven't set goals or updated them recently, now's a great time to do it. Year end, the beginning of the year, it's like that refreshing period of time when we want to sit down and look at this stuff. So set your goals, right? Develop new ones. Talk about your loved ones and people that are important to you. What are their goals? Like incorporate them together, right? Professional, personal, financial, look at all the different categories and just start setting some goals. We want to make sure they're smart. So specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-based. Those are kind of, what the guidelines that we want to use to set our goals. And then develop the accountability plan. So if you can put it on the calendar, we got to look at this stuff, at least once a month if you want to continue to push it forward. Otherwise, it just kind of gets lost in the mix. It might be in the back of your head, but you're not really pushing forward on it as much as you could if you're looking at it consistently. So set some goals, update goals. That's number 6. All right, so that's my list for 6 things. I know there's a ton more we can do. If you want to create a holistic financial plan, it's also a great time to do that. So hope you found this helpful. Love if you give us a like and a subscribe. And if you can share with a friend or a colleague that you might think would find some value here, we would greatly appreciate it. So until next time.